the Dutch. Thank you for your weekly share, and thanks for taking on the challenge of programming visually interesting events with 6-person teams. Yep, back in the day, we did take that challenge on. Fantasyland was a masterpiece. Thank you. Relatable and easy to follow from the stands, given the high rig, plate colors, and segments on the field. Most Big Bob events have been easy to follow. I tend to enjoy them as a spectator. There is a gladiator-like vibe to them. I think one of the reasons most Big Bob workouts are visually appealing is because of the slow motion nature of the race that is happening in something like a Big Bob event. Typically, there's a very clear line of who's leading and who's behind and where everybody is relative to each other, especially when you do just straight up like Big Bob sprints down the field or sled sprints for individuals. One of the guiding principles throughout the years that I've had when programming any event, and I started thinking this way in Carson, a couple years into Carson, was this notion of, let me back up. There's very often on all events we do at the games or even at semifinals, as soon as it's flowing and going off with no hitches, I will head up into the stands and take a look and watch and see how it plays out from afar. And I've learned a ton over the years doing that. And one of the things I learned at one point, or one of the things I thought at one point was I want to create a lot of these events, A, in a linear fashion so you can see who's winning, and B, you should be able to leave from your seat, go get a hot dog, come back and sit down, look at the floor and see who's winning without having to do any complicated math or without having to ask someone. And so that's where you'll see a lot of these events and how they flow and why they flow like they do is to try to create that visual. Also, back to the Big Bob and the visual nature of it looking clear, I also describe a lot of these events as slow motion horse races. So creating them in this idea of this fashion to where it is a slow motion horse race or, any race. I just like using that as an example. Races in general, 400-meter dash, race car driving, horse racing, all of that stuff is super intuitive to watch because it's easy to tell who's in front and who's losing. So in our events, using some of those, not concepts, but taking that into consideration when making them helps with the visual.
Someone was on yesterday, Dave Driscoll, and he was talking about the idea of giving a shit. It is truly mind-boggling being at the games with Dave because all he does is give a shit from the second like you land and he's just giving a shit. He's on full alert, like almost like he's a ground squirrel and he's looking for bald eagles. And he does all that shit. You see him go up in the stands, he sits down. Dave vanishes at the games and he's just give a shit guy about the games. And it's remarkable. And it's cool to hear his insight on that. Mr. Spin, and the game show it by all the details and nuances that he tends to. Mr. Spin.
The first thing I thought about when I heard he was talking about this was how different his thought of the spectator experience should be versus what we saw at semifinals, especially the teams. Like the semifinals for teams, I know it's a small field and it's usually complicated, but Boz's programming at semifinals this year was so confusing on the team side. There was the AMRAP, there was just a lot of confusion. You had so many of the running races, just even on individuals, where you're sitting there and watching a little card with a little square move down between, for the 800-meter run. You didn't see that progression, right? Like there's no way that you could go get a hot dog, come back and know what the heck's going on or who's even winning. And so I could definitely see him almost making that comment, like we're going to make changes next year of how that looks. And they have to be even more mindful when they think about it in Fort Worth with a, smaller field than North Park, especially for a team competition.
Is the field to play? I saw it's 30,000 square feet at Dickies.
So it's 250 feet by 125.
North Park?
No, the Dickies.
Okay.
I mean, the Coliseum was like 130 feet long. So, I mean, it'll be significantly longer. I think North Park was probably like 260 to 300 feet long and probably maybe 150, 180 wide. But they're going to have to be more creative if they're going to try to make it easy for somebody to watch, right? So that's definitely a priority for him, is to make it spectator friendly. And he's probably going to be working more with Boz to make sure that experience is better.
Mr. CrossFit Livermore.
Simplicity is the key, because if you really want to reach a broader audience that doesn't know much about CrossFit and they sit down with two of their CrossFit buddies that are like, you have to watch this event's going to be crazy, it has to be simple enough so they could come in blind and then have very quickly kind of understand what's going on and then continue to know what's happening, right? And so if you don't have that, I recall back to, I think, the 2008 games where they had that final and everybody had to start at different times according to their time that they had, completed the last workout in, and it was such chaos that nobody even knew what the fuck was going on. It was just a bunch of people doing clean and jerks, and then Jason won, and people were like, wait, that guy won, he was in the back. So it's cool to see that evolution from that to being able to stand and look into the field and just know what's going on. It's a really good job that he's focused on that and still continues to focus on that relentlessly.